Round two. Let's try again. Great. Can we mute people, please? There's a lot of noise on the line. Thank you. So yeah, I was just teaching a weekend this weekend, and I told, we were talking about relationships and intimacy and desire, and we talked a lot about how sometimes you just have to do a do-over. So today we're doing a do-over. So I apologize that we were a half hour in and we finally were able to get this up and running. Thankfully, we have another platform that we sometimes use. So we're going to use Zoom. Is everyone seeing me? Because I'm not seeing me as the speaker so I just want to make sure people are actually seeing me.
I can see you.
Okay.
Chat saying yes.
Great. Okay, good. That's fine then. All right, round two. So, and that was such a great intro that you all didn't hear. So no, let me do it again. All right. So I want to welcome you to the passion, pleasure, and possibilities of claiming your orgasm. So this is the first of a series of online workshops that I'm going to be offering. And we had a really great response to this. We just decided about a week ago we were going to do it, and we had a lot of signups, and it's great to have those of you here who could be here live. We are recording. We're going to encourage you to use the chat. You're already getting really good with the chat. So definitely feel free to chat throughout if any questions come up or there's things you want clarified. Please definitely let us know. We are going to run 90 minutes, so I apologize if this messes up people's timing. But we'll go till like 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. If you have to jump off and watch the rest of it on replay, you can, and hopefully it doesn't screw up your day and you can still be with us. So I just want to welcome you all to the call, and I really, really value your time. I know your time is valuable, and I really apologize that we've had some trouble and we've wasted some of it today. So I hope that the content in today's class is going to be really helpful to you. I know that there's lots of ways you can spend your time, and I really appreciate that you want to spend some of it with me and with this topic. Elise, is there anything that we need to let people know about before we jump in?
You're muted. Hi, everyone. Right, thank you so much for your patience. I'm glad we got just about everyone switched over. There is a couple ways that just keep your videos off screen if you don't want to be seen, and they won't be recorded. So this part of the recording, if you can see yourself at the top, won't be on the recording, so you don't have to worry about that. Please use the chat for things that are coming up for you. Feel free to jump in, and if you go to your settings, there is a couple ways that you can adjust the feedback, the bandwidth, your audio. All of that can be adjusted if you go to the settings tab. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll be sending resources out as we go along, and if anything big comes up, send me an email at info@amyjogoddard.com, which I said last time, but you couldn't hear me, so I didn't get any emails. But if anything else goes wrong, feel free to pop us an email at info@amyjogoddard.com.
Why don't you just put that in the chat for them?
Sure.
So they have that. Awesome. If you like to tweet, I'm Amy Jo Goddard on Twitter, and you can use a hashtag #ClaimYourOrgasm. So I love when people tweet if they're like nuggets or things that you want to put out there. Happy for that. And also on Facebook, I would love to have any of your comments on my sexual empowerment expert page. Please definitely go to that page and like it if you haven't yet. We're going to record the class. It's about 90 minutes. I'm going to jump in. I really want to encourage you. I know that like with all of the shuffling at the beginning, you might feel really distracted now. So since we're all here together, I just want to encourage you to set things aside, except for maybe some paper. At some point, you're going to want some paper, and just really be present to the class. You've chosen to spend some time and some money to be here today, and so I want to really encourage you to really be present and take it in as much as you can. I really want to thank you for the questions that you sent in, and I'm going to answer those throughout the class today because they're relevant to some of the things that we're going to talk about, and then there's a few at the end that I'm going to answer. So I will do my best to answer all of the questions that came in for this particular class. I've been getting a lot of questions over the last few weeks around some of the desire and voice webinars that I was doing, and we got some really great questions about pleasure and orgasm for this one. So I'm going to answer as many questions as I can. I'm really delighted to offer this webinar, and I know that a lot of women really want to figure out the puzzle of orgasm, and it feels that way. It feels like a puzzle, and how to experience more pleasure. I was not orgasmic until I was about 19 years old, and I was really determined to figure it out. If any of you have seen the TED Talk, and maybe some of you are watching it just now, I tell a story in my TED Talk, my TEDx talk about being shamed by my mother for touching my genitals. And not even in a sexual way. I just was like fascinated and curious and interested. And that shaming moment impacted me so much. What I didn't say in my TEDx talk is that I stopped touching myself for 10 years. I literally did not touch myself for 10 years. So I was really determined to figure it out once I broke free of that. And it really wasn't until I went to college, and my college professors actually told me to go home and to masturbate and to learn about my body. And I got all that permission to do that. I had felt so much shame also about not being able to orgasm. And I know a lot of women feel that way. And I had boyfriends who I was sexual with who tried. My first love, oh my gosh, bless him. He really tried hard to help me, have an orgasm, but he couldn't figure it out because I hadn't figured it out. He really tried in earnest. And I even remember a time when he took my hand and placed my hand on my genitals to have me do it and to have me show him. And I yanked my hand away because I had been so conditioned in that sex negative message I had gotten from my mother, not to touch myself. So he gave it his best, but he couldn't do it for me. He couldn't give it to me, right? And we treat sex that way, we treat pleasure that way, and we treat women's bodies and orgasms that way. Like it's something that someone takes from you or gives to you. We get given away when people get married. I mean, it's like kind of crazy when you think about how much of our language is about this like kind of barter that happens. But what needed to happen is that I needed to take full responsibility for it. And at the time, I definitely didn't get that. And I definitely would not have known what that actually means had someone said that to me. So learning to orgasm changed something in me significantly. Once I figured that out, I had an agency over myself and my body that I had not had before. I had this new confidence in myself, and I understood something new about my sexuality and its power within me, not in relation to the outside world, right? It was something that was like about me. And so much of what we learn about our sexuality is about people's reactions to us in the outside world and how sexy we are and how the world responds. And we become this like object in a lot of ways, and our sexuality there's some ways in which it gets so depersonalized, but that was a very different kind of power that was really located inside of myself. I believe that orgasm and pleasure are really important. They are necessary to live in this mad world. They are our birthright. And it's bigger than sex. It's bigger than some like hedonistic idea of pleasure. And I think hedonism is perfectly fine, and I don't have a judgment about that. In fact, sometimes I think we could use a little more of it. But pleasure really is so much bigger than that. I have two women's groups right now, one that's virtual and one that I meet with in person. And I am so struck by how much the idea of sexuality being a luxury or as something that they should just not be focused on is coming up. And yet, all of these women are compelled to do this work and to get to the core of their sexual selves so that they can live in more bliss and ecstasy. pleasure and orgasm get talked about as if they are extraneous or indulgent and as something that we should downplay. And so I think a lot of guilt and mixed feelings can come up about that, right? It gets talked about as if it's not spiritual, right? A lot of people are walking around thinking like this. And I think it's madness, really. I think it's madness. It's like sexuality is as spiritual as it gets, you know, for people who are on a spiritual path, which most of my clients in my tribe are, because that's how I talk about sex. Many people see the spiritual path as intrinsically being able to like absolve, like that it requires like absolving yourself of this world, right? To transcend the physical. But spirit, God, goddess, universe, universal energy, whatever you call it, you know, or even if you're agnostic or you don't kind of believe that, right? You know that there's some universal creative energy around us and we're here, right? We're here on earth, whether you think something put us here on earth or this is just where we exist, but we're not somewhere in the ether, we're here. And so the most spiritual thing we can do is learn to live in the human physical world and love the people we are with, which means we have to learn to love ourselves. And to me, that is the first and foremost and most primary human developmental task we have. And it is that simple, and yet it's so hard for people, and it's so complex, the reasons why we don't. But if we're really going to love others, we have to learn that self-love. And to really, that spirituality is about fully enjoying all that life on earth offers us. That's what we're here to do. So we've been given this amazing power of our senses, and we're meant to use them. We're meant to understand them and to commune with this natural world. We were given a phenomenal body that's capable of ecstatic pleasure, and we're meant to experience it and enjoy it. Yet most people are holding back. They're stopping themselves from feeling too much, from going to the depths. How much do we stop ourselves from doing that? Not just with orgasm, right? We are here for the depths. We're here to push our limits and to explore what we're capable of. When we connect to our deepest sexual ecstasy, we blur the lines between the physical and the spiritual world, and they can become one. I mean, that can happen. That's not your everyday sexual experience, in my experience. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it's really magnificent. That is the spiritual path, right? Sexuality and pleasure are both paths to the divine. They are paths to our deepest selves and our deepest longings. So we have to ask ourselves, why are we holding back? We're holding back on life. We're refusing to put on our oxygen mask and suck. We're containing ourselves when we're meant to expand and we're meant to be huge. We are limiting the possibilities of our experience. I hear so many questions about orgasm, right? Have I had one? I'm unsure. We're unsure because we've been watching too much Hollywood and we're in a constant false comparison about our sexuality, our orgasm, our expression, and we desperately want to be free. So let's talk about freedom. Let's talk about why orgasm and pleasure are a fundamental part of your freedom and why they are a necessity, not a luxury, if you really want to live fully this gorgeous human life you've been given. So I want to talk about the most common reasons why women hold back and do not experience the orgasms and pleasure they truly want. I have worked with thousands of people, and I can tell you that there are about 5 super common ways that people hold themselves back from pleasure and orgasm. And I would say that they're so common that if they were considered a public health issue, which is really debatable in my opinion, that they would be called an epidemic. We would have an epidemic because these things are just, I cannot even tell you how much I have seen around the issues, these 5 issues, and people's unrest about their relationship to pleasure and their desire to have more orgasm over the 20-year span that I've been doing this work. So I'm going to jump into this in a minute. I'm just going to pause for a moment and make sure that technically we're doing okay. Yeah, that's just distracting right there. If you want. Okay. All right. So we're going to keep going. So feel free to, I see people are starting to chat. That's awesome. Please feel free to use the chat. And Elise is just going to kind of like wave at me and check in if there are some like burning questions or things that you want to have me pause and address as we're going. Since we're not in a room together, it's a little different from what a in-person workshop would be like. So we're going to use the chat, and Elise will be my communicator for that. Okay, so orgasm issue number 1. Let's just write this up here. So number 1 is about receiving. It's the inability to receive. And then there's lots of subcategories of this. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on this, and there's some questions that came in around this too. So it is mind-boggling how many people really cannot fully receive sexually. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes there are reasons that we're choosing and that are really healthy reasons. And sometimes there are really things that are getting in the way. So I encounter countless women who have difficulty in receiving. It looks a lot of different ways. At the root of not being able to receive, at the root is that we are really socialized to care for everybody else and to give to others constantly. And then we wonder why we're not able to receive, right? We've been conditioned not to. So that's just like our baseline. And I think that's really important to acknowledge. I don't think I've had one client who I've worked with in an intense way who did not have tendencies towards people pleasing. So that's always a part of this work. And it's definitely a part of what gets in the way around orgasm and pleasure. So I've seen women, serve everyone else dinner, and then everyone starts eating and they don't even wait for her to sit down and join them. How many people have like seen that in your family or maybe experienced that yourself? We've all witnessed the woman who does everything in a household to care for the children, the partner, the laundry, the cleaning, the cooking, plus whatever other work she might be doing in the world. And then there's still always more to give. There's always more people want from her. So when does she get to just sit back and actually receive from others? Many women live their entire lives this way. And that's real. That's real. And that's a big thing to recondition yourself around. And that requires some attention and really some shifting of kind of how we're doing things in some big ways. And it also requires support. So even if you buck this idea and you are determined to have mutuality in your relationships, let's just look at how that mutuality often isn't there, right? So certainly sexually, it's common for men to get their orgasm, right? To feel satisfied, and then sex ends, whether or not their partners get off, and not all men are like that. And for a lot of men, they really want to be connected to their partner and their partners, they care about their partner having an orgasm, but I think a lot of times we get into these patterns, and we've also learned a sexual story that sex ends after the male orgasm in heterosexual sex. So in heterosexual relationships, the scales are still so uneven around this. And you know, we are questioning this approach to sex, and yet there is still so far to go to change this paradigm, that sex ends when a man is done. You know, we're certainly in a better place now than we were 20 years ago, 40 years ago. But it's shocking to me how many people still experience sex that way. Another reason women do not receive is that they're not able to be vulnerable enough, to be open to receiving. To receive sexually is to be vulnerable, right? It is to be given to. It is to be seen and to be heard. And if you are not used to being given to, you're used to being the giver, right? That's going to feel very awkward. And that might feel really vulnerable. And I've watched women, I just came off of a women's weekend last weekend, who were like in a lot of struggle around just allowing themselves, really allowing themselves to receive, allowing themselves to be there, doing the work. This is wildly uncomfortable for many people. So can you be vulnerable enough to take as long as you want to take to really get what you want and not feel bad about it, and to just revel in your own pleasure? And if you're not there, that's the biggest thing to begin to look at and work on, developing that capacity to receive. Now, that said, there are often reasons why a person does not feel like they can be vulnerable, right? There might be good reasons. You might be protecting yourself in a way that's really smart. I don't think that's always the wrong thing, you know? You might not feel like your partner is a person that you want to be that vulnerable with, you know? Or you might not feel enough safety with them. You might be in a place of having a hard time using your voice to say, yes, more please, right? Or slow down, or not that, this, right? Or I need an adjustment. And just to be able to use your voice in that way requires a certain confidence and also vulnerability, right? So if you're not able to use your voice to really modulate what happens to you, then it would make sense that you would feel too vulnerable. And then you might just retreat into